Alright, so I figured I might as well just go through this. Since I'm already in the process of doing it, make a video on it. I know there's already some out there, but maybe somebody who's already on my channel comes across it. I just want to be there to help. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the FEP sheet after messing with this new resin made by Rich Opto. You can check out that other video on my channel. I went a little low on the exposure. I had lots of things that were stuck. Had trouble getting them off, so in the end, I mean, you can kind of see how rough of a shape that this particular sheet, it's loose right now, but got there in the middle where most of my stuff prints. So I went ahead, I'm going to go ahead and swap this out, but I figured I might as well film it to show the process and how to replace that. So you're going to need a couple of different things. Biggest thing is you're going to need either the Allen wrenches that came with your mono axe, or if you're lucky or you have them laying around, these little, I guess you could call them star bit screwdrivers. These things work awesome for doing this. So I have one in both sizes for the what I would call the bottom as well as the top side. But the Allen wrenches that came with your Anycubic will work just fine. And then you're obviously going to want some kind of a sharp blade. This is just what I typically use to remove supports, and it's just sitting right here by all my printer stuff. So as you can see, I already removed most of the screws here on the bottom side. You go ahead and you'll just pop those out. The FEP sheet will come right out. And then you get into the fun part, all of these little tiny screws. So I'm going to go ahead, fast forward through all of this, and then we'll get into the fun part of putting a new film sheet on there. Alright, let's go ahead and pop this guy off here. Make sure you don't lose any of these screws. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop them out. Perfect. Now we have our two pieces in our old FEP sheet here. And this will go in the trash. Now, the whole reason why these FEP sheets should last you a really, really, really long time. So I'm under, the idea that as long as you don't sit there and drain your resin out constantly, for whatever the reason might be that you're doing that, just try to avoid it at all costs. You can cover the resin vat up. If you have an FDM printer, there's multiple files on Thingiverse that'll have a cover, keep the sunlight out, keep it from curing if you're having it sit for multiple days. If you do let it sit for multiple days, be sure that you mix it up very, very well inside the vat. Use your plastic spatula. Just don't touch the FEP sheet. I've had an FEP sheet in my Photon for an extremely long time without any issues whatsoever. So just don't touch it if you don't have to. If you do have to clean it out, use a microfiber cloth, highly recommended disposable. Don't, at least try not to use isopropyl alcohol. I've noticed isopropyl alcohol has a tendency to fog up the FEP film. So from my experience, just try to avoid that. Anytime that you touch it, just treat it like it's acrylic. That's all I can say if you've had any experience using anything acrylic. Or treat it like it's wet with paint, more or less. Try not to touch it, and it'll last you a very long time. So I know from the research that I did leading up to buying the Mono X that the stock FEP film, which is what was on there, is not very good. So I figured that that was a really good opportunity to test out this new resin and see how low I could go. And, well, we saw the results of that. So I'm just going to be using the Solvol 3D FEP release film. This is the same brand that I've used for my Photon for an extremely long time. I've always been really happy with the results. I want to say it is just a little bit thicker than the stock. It definitely makes a much better sound whenever the print is peeling off of the FEP. Granted, I just recently started using PTFE just on the Mono X. I don't use it on my Photon, and that seems to really take away almost any of that noise that you typically hear of it peeling itself off of the film. So this is what we're going to be using today. So let me go ahead. Alright, so I got that bad boy open. There's actually 3 of them in here. So I have some room for error in the future, but I would much rather just keep one on there for an extended period of time. I like this FEP film because it does come with a protective coating. I've bought others in the past from my Photon, regular Photon, that did not have this, and they can get scratched in shipping. I've had it happen. So I'll go ahead and get this guy off here. And remember what I said, we're gonna try to limit our exposure or our touching of this as much as we can so that it can be as pristine as possible. Now, you're gonna see videos of guys going through and putting bottle caps and all kinds of stuff underneath this to try and make it loose. I'm gonna tell you right now that is absolutely not necessary. You're not gonna put it on extremely tight, and you will have the benefit of how these rubber feet inlay. It actually leaves a gap, just a little tiny gap between the screen and the bed and the FEP sheet, to where you won't have to have that like perfectly tuned like you did in the previous printers. I know a lot of people are going to combat me on that, but I'm telling you, you don't have to do that. You did on the old Photons. It was absolutely necessary. I've done it many times, and I know that that was just something that needed to be done. So now we'll go through, and I'm just going to punch these screws in kind of in a random pattern to help pinch this down. And you'll see that it's loose, but that doesn't matter. You'll see why here in a minute. So what I'm going to do with each one of these screws is I'm going to take it and I'm just going to pop it, just give it a little push, and it'll work its way in. So I'll go through and take care of the rest of these, and then I'll get right back with you guys.
A few moments later.
Alright, I don't want to make you guys sit through another fast motion of me putting in the screws that you just watched me take out. So I went ahead and put these in. Instead, I went ahead and I did kind of a random pattern. With the way that these are machined so precisely, I'm sure that it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. But just be on the safe side, went ahead and did that. You don't have to put them in very tight. Obviously, just snug is good. There's plenty of friction that gets put down on this with that many screws. You don't need to worry about it. It's not going to leak. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut off the excess, because if we don't, it's not going to fit. And now is a really good time to do that. So let's kind of run our blade across the edge here. Being sure to cut towards ourselves like a good Boy Scout. Kidding. Cut away from yourself every time that you possibly can. Unless you're going to not be able to control the sharp object in your hand well enough. Ask me how I know. Scar right there. And obviously having an extremely sharp blade does make this a heck of a lot easier to do. So this one's been through the ringer, I would say, so it's probably about time to swap it out. Let's cut a couple thousand supports off various miniatures and prints and whatnot. So there we go, we have our FEP screen. Still a little loose, but like I said, that's perfectly fine, and I'll show you why right now. Now, the way that this is going to work is, you'll notice this when you take it out, but this is going to sit in here, okay? And as this pushes down, this rim is going to help create both a seal and the tension on the FEP. You're going to find videos out there, again, typically with some older printers that are going to talk about trying to tune these. Again, that is not necessary anymore. Now, you don't want to put it too tight, because then you're going to put an abnormal amount of stress on the FEP sheet that's likely going to cause it to tear around this edge. I mean, they do a really good job of machining this, keeping it clear, keeping it nice and clean, but still, there's a good chance that you could damage the FEP a lot easier if you're putting too much tension. So one of the good things you can do, just to give you a reference point, is to take a look at when you first get your printer, how tight is that on there? And try to get it somewhat close to that. So I'll go ahead and finish putting these screws in. Now, one thing I definitely should mention is when you're going through, and you're tightening these down, doing kind of in a random pattern like I did, the ones that you put in first are going to definitely be loose. So like these ones that I'm tightening right now are some of the first ones that I put in, and because I snugged each one a little bit as I went around, it started to loosen the ones that I had originally put in because it tightened it down. And that's perfectly fine. Again, you're going to get a perfect seal on this. It's a thick enough piece of aluminum that goes all the way around that you're not going to have warping. The screws are close enough together. It's just, you're not going to have that problem. But the big thing is you definitely want each one to be, to be snug. So if you're not getting, it's like a 2-finger easy, if you're not getting tension, it's definitely not tight enough. Like that one, I mean, it went a full rotation. And then we're just going to go around and just, lightly snug them. That one's good. That one will go a little bit. That one's good. That one's good. That one's a little loose. There we go. And just double check each and every single one of them. And you'll get to the point where you're just maybe just doing a little turn on each one. That one might be a little bit more, and so on and so forth. So don't overthink it. This is not a hard thing. It doesn't have to be a hard thing. It doesn't have to be intimidating. These FEP sheets are relatively durable, in terms of their ability to, hold tension. But this is it. And I mean, again, you'll see videos where they'll be like, yep, sounds like a B sharp to me. That isn't going to matter. You're going to succeed as long as you have everything tightened down nicely, and this is going to sit nicely on the bed. If these screws are sticking out, you miss one, whatever, that's where you're going to run into issues. This is not an exact science. It doesn't have to be, and don't let anybody tell you that it does. This is going to work perfectly, and I'm super excited. I am going to take a microfiber cloth and just kind of clean up some of the fingerprints that I had. Typically, I wouldn't have any reason to touch this, but throughout doing this video, I kind of did a little bit. No big deal. I'll go through, clean these up. I'll throw it on the printer, and then I'm going to start printing. Another question that I've seen on our Facebook group quite a bit is, do I need to re-level the bed when I replace the FEP? You should not have to. If you're going with an FEP that is, a different thickness, maybe, but it's going to be so minuscule, it's not really going to make a difference. So if you want to do it just to give yourself some warm fuzzies, go ahead and do it. But if your bed was already level, you haven't had any adhesion issues whatsoever, I wouldn't touch it. You could try to print some form of calibration. You could do one of the pucks that I've shown, one of the calibration discs that I've did throughout a different video. You can do anything just to verify that you have proper adhesion, and then go from there. But I'm going to trust that everything should stay relatively consistent on my end, so I'm not going to make any changes. But if anybody has any questions, concerns, you want to debate anything that I said, go ahead and comment below. I will be happy to get back with you, answer your questions or your concerns, or address any issues you have with my process. I've been doing this for quite a few years. I've replaced many FEP sheets on my Anycubic Photon, which is essentially the same process as this, and I have zero issues with it whatsoever. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Alright, Chris with Random Weekend Adventures, here with another very random 3D printing video. Appreciate you guys sticking around, and I will see you next time. Oh, and before I forget, now that I got that all clean, I'm going to go ahead and throw some PTFE lubricant on it. This is absolutely not necessary. but I have noticed that it certainly helps. So I'm going to put quite a bit on there. I'm going to grab a nice clean microfiber rag, and I'm just going to use just a nice small amount here. And then I'm just going to kind of dab it in a little bit, get it in my cloth. And you can use all kinds of different things. This PTFE lubricant is just a recommendation that we've had throughout the community for quite a long time. I've heard really, really good experiences with WD-40, and to be 100% honest with you, this stuff smells exactly like WD-40. So that might be realistically all it is, just maybe a little bit more expensive. But this stuff works extremely well. I'll put that on there like this. I'm going to let it sit for just a couple of minutes, and then you'll kind of notice it'll pretty much be dry and cured, at which point I'll go through, I will wipe, kind of buff it out, almost like waxing a car. Wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi, and then I'll be ready to go. And this stuff will last quite a long time. At least I don't really notice it, coming off or making too much of a difference 10, 20 prints in. But by that point, I'm usually ended up having to drain existing resin, and I like to try new things, so I usually clean it, put a new coat of this on, then do some new resin, each and every single time. So I'd say maybe 1 liter of resin, I'll reapply this. Another liter resin, reapply this again. Probably by the 4th, the 5th, 6th time that I do that, I'm probably ready for a new FEP sheet for one reason or another, because I'm too busy screwing around and getting stuff stuck to it, because I'm messing around with different resins, different exposures. But if you guys stick with what you know and with the settings that you get dialed in, then you should be golden. This stuff should last you an extremely, extremely long time. A bottle of this will probably last you the rest of your life. So awesome. Did not want to forget that part. Thanks again, guys.